Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got something a little different for you. Now, one of the comments that comes up on the channel all of the time is, if you were to move house, what would you do differently next time based on everything you've learned from your solar, batteries, EVs, heat pumps and all the other renewable tech that we've put into this house? Well, I can come up with an answer, but I think it'd be much more interesting to ask somebody who's actually done it, who has put a system into one house, has moved to another house, has actually ripped out a system that was in the second house and then put a third system in place of it. So today, I'd like to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Simon Dudley. Simon is going to join me and we're going to talk about what he did and why he made certain decisions. Okay, so welcome to the channel, Simon. I say most of the people on this call won't know who you are, what you do. They probably figured out that you're in the US, but you don't really have a US accent. So why don't you give us a bit of background, who you are, where do you live, what do you do, all of that kind of good stuff.
Sure. Well, firstly, John, thanks for having me on the show, mate. John, for the audience, John and I have been friends and work colleagues actually for close to 30 years, which is pretty scary for everyone involved. We started as small children, if you want to age us. Uh, so yeah, I've been in the States now since 2008 or nine, whichever it was. I started in Southern California in San Diego, which is about 100 miles south of LA. Didn't have any P there because I had a really old, historic 1913 house. And I know that everyone who's watching this is going, my local pub is 500 years older than that. But by American standards, it was a pretty old house. So I couldn't put PV on that. After about 4 years, for reasons, I moved to Austin, Texas, which, for those of you who aren't aware, is pretty hot and very humid. And I had, I guess, what by British standards would be a fairly big house. So it was about just under 5,000 square feet. My electricity bill was something like $450 to $500 a month.
Now,
And
I
because
assume most of that live. I mean, as Simon said, we've worked together, so I've spent a bit of time in Austin. I assume
yeah,
most of that would come down to air conditioning because it is brutally hot in Austin in the summer.
it is, and in fact, and the summer is, as much as 9 months long. Uh, the big problem with Austin, and we'll talk about where I am now in a little bit, but the big problem with Austin was it would get to, in Celsius, it would get to high 30s. Um, we did we did over 1 year I was there. We did over 100 days in a row where it was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And 100 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, is 38, 39 Celsius. It's
Yeah.
about that sort of temperature. But the problem was, not only does it get super hot, but it also gets super humid, which means that even at night, you go out and let the dog out at 2 in the morning and it's still 34, 33 Celsius. So the heat soak just becomes insane. You can't go, well, I'll open the windows in the evening. And no, you're not doing that. And all the mosquitoes come in, as well as all the moisture and the heat. So not only are you cooling down the house in the height of the summer, 24 hours a day. I mean, typically my HVAC system, from probably late June until early October, would be running 22 hours a day. But most of the time, you're also running the HVAC just to get the moisture level down. So we used to run the HVAC to keep the humidity level below 50%. Um, and that just sucked power all the time. If the HVAC wasn't running, then my electricity bill was basically, it wasn't quite zero, but it was very
A
small.
pittance, but
Yeah,
still $5,000 to $6,000 a year for HVAC is just madness.
yeah. After we'd been there we would lived in Austin for about 12 years. After about 10, we replaced the HVAC system and got um, a much more efficient version, which had variable speeds and all this. $40,000, by the way. for the HVAC system to replace these things. I had two. One system was 5 ton. Don't really know what that means,
I
but
was going to say,
five tons.
surely not 5 ton in weight.
No, possibly more than that. The thing was enormous, but it was whatever 5 tons means in HVAC systems. It's a big system. That was the upstairs one, and the downstairs one was a 4 ton system. So they were they were big. I don't really know what that means in BTUs or kilowatts of power or whatever that is. We can
Well,
look it up.
but you can convert that because you can go. It's $5,000 a year. It doesn't matter how many BTUs it is. It's about how much
Yeah,
money
no,
comes out of your wallet.
it's fair. Although, also as an understanding, the house isn't well built in Texas. Unlike, well, UK houses are well built. No, probably not. But not a well built house particularly. Um, and it was big. I mean, just under 5,000 square feet probably makes it triple the size of an average UK
Yeah,
house.
it's about
Now,
three
look, I'm
times
not.
the size of my house. So, and my house is
Is
a
it?
pretty standard 3-bed house. So yeah, about 3 times the size.
Yeah, and please don't. I don't want to suggest I'm showing off. It's just how big the houses are,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's just. It's a.
everything's
It was
bigger
a.
in Texas.
Yeah, and I've got 4 kids, and it's a big house, so it didn't look like a mansion. It looked like a pretty standard house on my street. There you
So
go.
I remember the conversation that we had at the time when you were looking at, the new HVAC system had gone in, the first bills were coming in,
Yeah.
and we'd been discussing solar, and I had a small system here in the UK by that, and you were certainly interested in, okay, I need to do something about my energy bills. So what talk us through the process. How did you get to where you got to with that system?
Well, it's a good question, and I don't want to suggest I was particularly scientific. I mean, obviously, I told you I was being very scientific and looking at all the process, but I really wasn't. So, Texas is a bit unusual. The US, in many respects, but let's talk about power specifically. So, the US has effectively three national grids. It has the East grid, which is everything up to the Rockies, from the East Coast all the way across to the Rockies, sort of 2/3 of the way across the country. And then there's the other side of the Rockies, so that would be Oregon State, Oregon, um, California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and then there's Texas' own thing. Texas, for whatever bizarre political reasons, Texas decided it didn't like regulation, which means rules, and therefore built its own, or decided to cut itself off from the rest of the grid. Now, I put my original PV in. I put in 10.5 kilowatts of a SolarEdge system, just solar, no batteries at that point, and it made a dramatic difference. Austin, people think of Austin as a desert, but actually it gets more rain than London does. It gets about 34 inches of rain a year. London gets about 29. Those numbers
My
can be
memory of the rain
perverted.
in Austin was you got all that 34 inches in about 2 days. When
Well,
it came down biblically.
well, the night before my wedding, and for the audience, John was actually the best man at my wedding. We had, I think it was 20, just a bit under 20 inches of rain in 24 hours. Um, yeah, it can. That was extreme, but we do get, or they do get, very heavy rain for short periods of time. A lot of houses don't even have drains, don't have guttering on. So they don't bother. It's just like it would all overwhelm the drain or the guttering system anyway. So don't bother with it, even on relatively, big houses like my old one. Now I put drains in or guttering in because just hated the lines it would cut in the grass. But anyway, so I put in 10.5 kilowatts. What Austin did not have, and I don't think any of the power, maybe some of them do now, but at the time, this is 15 years ago, there was no on peak, off peak process in Austin. And I was paying, from memory, I was paying 11 cents a kilowatt hour. So in pence, that's what, 8p or something similar a
Yeah.
kilowatt
So
hour.
you were paying flat rate what we would get as cheap rate overnight energy, but with today's prices.
Yes. And here's where it got interesting. I could sell it back to the grid at 1.9 cents a kilowatt hour. which meant that it was not worth selling it back to the grid. I might as well just put a laser on the top of the house or something, just anything to burn the power, because I'm not giving it to the grid.
That's the grid's way of saying we don't want your power, so we're going to offer you a paltry amount of money.
Yeah, it was not impressive. Uh, and so that worked, and it cut my electricity bill massively. I mean, my summer electricity bill went from $450 to $500 a month to like 120, I think was the highest I ever saw subsequently. And then 2021 happened, and we had it's known in Texas as the snowpocalypse, and we actually got a significant amount of snow. I mean, I think it was 6 inches to a foot of snow, and they nearly lost the grid. In fact, if anyone wants to go and look it up, there'll be 1,000 YouTube videos on it. I may even have created a video about it, about the snowpocalypse. And they got within 4 minutes 37 seconds, that's the official number, of losing the entire grid. And honestly, that frightened the bejeebus out of me, because if they'd lost the grid, it would have taken between 4 and 6 weeks to bring it back up from a black start for a whole grid. Because Texas is bigger than France, right? And has 27 million people in it or something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a proper country-sized economy. We couldn't have left. It's like, oh, well, you just get up and drive away. You couldn't. It's 700 miles to the next state from Austin, or to get outside of the grid, it's
Yeah.
700 miles. So my car wouldn't have done 700 miles. No, I don't know any car that would do
And none of the
700
fuel
miles.
stations would have had any power to power the pumps.
And everyone's armed to the teeth. This is Texas.
Yeah.
It it genuinely would have been uh, a catastrophic event. I mean, I mean that in the truest sense of the word. I think society would have broken down. I mean, they say that all societies are three meals away from anarchy. I think it would have been absolutely catastrophic.
So you mentioned earlier, you said it frightened the bejesus out of you. So what did you do? What were the actions that you took on it?
Well, I did a couple of things. The first thing I did was go to Costco and buy a triple fuel generator, and put one of these, the standard 110 volt plug you see in the wall. They're really low power, only 1500 watts maximum, so you can't use those. But you can get sockets that you can plug into the side of your house. People use them for all home uh, generators, and for RVs, and for other applications like that. So I bought myself an 8 kilowatt wheelable generator. Cost me under $1,000. It would run on petrol. It would run on natural gas, so mains gas, as it
Mm-hmm.
were. And I had a cable that ran my barbecue, but it would also run the thing. And I could run it on an LPG tank. And I had all that plumbed in, and that would be my backup. But of course, you're going to run out of gasoline, or you're going to run out of natural gas pretty quickly. So I then made the decision, which I suppose it's too late to regret now, but I made the decision to go and buy two LG 16 kilowatt hour batteries. I don't remember the model number, and it's irrelevant because they stopped selling them almost immediately
Yeah. So
after I
this was
bought them
before
anyway.
SolarEdge had their own batteries. They did a
Yeah.
partnership with LG, and they were recommending the LG Chem batteries to everybody. And from everything
Yes.
I heard about them, was big mistake.
Well, yes. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I was offered Tesla Powerwalls at the time, but I was already going off Elon, and this was before he went mad. Um, uh, and the LGs, they were less expensive with a higher capacity. So I got these two 16 kilowatt hour batteries for a total, obviously, of 32 kilowatts. I also did another 5 kilowatts onto my roof. Unfortunately, because of the way LG, or not LG, SolarEdge worked, I ended up with two inverters. One was 7.5 kilowatts, and the other one was 10. And I could only plumb one of them into the batteries. Um, and therefore, I ended up with 15 kilowatts on my roof, but only 5 kilowatts charged the batteries. And the other 10 kilowatts was just used for normal power.
And you
And
were
because,
exporting that at 1 cent a kilowatt hour to the power company.
yeah, so from a backup point of view, it was a good investment. From a from an economic point of view, short of a catastrophic end of civilization. And I genuinely believe, by the way, if they'd lost power for a month, it would be anarchy. It would be absolute anarchy. And people don't. I think too many of us think of the world as with a continuity bias. Oh, it's always been like this in the past. It will always be like this in the future. I don't think that's true at all. And that's one of the reasons I've gone down this journey with all of this technology is that I want to back up for when the wheels come off.
Yeah.
So it was a good backup, but it wasn't a good economic decision. Getting 15 kilowatts on my roof lowered my electricity bill to something like $20 a month. But the original return on investment was going to be about 7 years. And after I put the batteries in and the extra PV, the investment or return on investment went up to about 18 years. So, and then we moved.
So I was going to say, I remember that day when you rang me. It all just the whole system had gone in, and you said, "Yeah, we're moving to Colorado." So
Yeah,
just get it all working, get it all settled in, and then it's like, right, up sticks. We're going to move to another state and start again. Um,
yes.
but I do remember you telling me at the time that the house you were moving into already had PV.
Yeah, well, let's finish the Texas story first with this little story. So we sold the house. Um, I was hoping that having, basically so close to no electricity bills possible as to be near enough era, I thought that would help improve the value of the house. I can't say that it did. It didn't. I didn't get an uplift on, ultimately probably a $60,000 investment with all of that and the batteries and stuff. Didn't get anything extra for the house, and the new buyers never asked a single question about it. And in fact, I think I can probably admit it now. I probably passed a statute of limitations on this stuff. I know, as a matter of fact, they never even logged in to the system because I still had access to it 2 years later. Um,
Well,
Not that I did anything to it, but kind of just, I wonder, and, oh, yeah, I've still got access. So they got a really cheap electricity bill. They probably didn't even understand that they'd done so.
I think as a wise man once said to me, the value of something is what somebody else is willing to pay for it. So if these people were just happy with whatever their electricity bill was, they weren't going to pay for a $60,000 system because they, in their eyes, they probably didn't need it.
Probably. They didn't understand. I think they just didn't understand what they were getting. I think if it ever stopped working, they'd understand. Their electricity bill was likely to go from $20 to 500. They'd probably noticed then. But if they'd never lived there before, I knew nothing of these people. We never met them, so I don't know where they were from or anything. So who knows?
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the story. So we then moved to Colorado. We bought. I'm embarrassed to admit a bigger house. Because it's not that much bigger, really, but it's got a basement. And the first things we did was build out the basement. For those of you who aren't aware of Colorado weather, we're in Fort Collins, which is north of Denver, and the whole Front Range so the Front Range, the east side of the Rockies. So if you're on a wagon train coming from St. Louis or somewhere, and you hit where it goes, rolly hill, Midwest, as soon as it goes zunk, into the Rockies, we're right on the edge there. And they call that the Front Range because it's the front of the mountains that you meet if you're on a wagon train, right? It's fairly logical.
Now,
So
does the question I've got to ask then is, does the weather hit the mountains from the east, or does the weather come down from the mountains from the west?
well, weather's in most of the planet due to, rotation of the Earth. It's predominantly the weather comes from the west. That's true everywhere on the Earth,
So
really.
you get
With
cold weather, winter, snow.
Yes and no. So the weather here is compared with Britain, right, which is probably the most of your viewers are going to be UK based. So we have hotter summers, maybe high 30 Celsius in the summer in the day, but down to 16, 17, 18 degrees Celsius at night in the summer. And then in the winter, it can be 0 to -5 in the daytime. And I mean, couple of weeks ago, it got down to -22 Celsius. A couple of years ago, we got down to -28 Celsius.
Yeah,
Which
minus 22 or minus 20, it doesn't really matter. If that happened here, that would be the end of the UK. We wouldn't be able to cope with those kind of temperatures.
Yeah, I agreed. So it's more extreme. Interestingly, well, interesting to me at least, we actually get, because of the mountains, the Rockies are, you can see them from the house. They are obviously very high mountains. I think 58 of the top 100 mountains in America are all in Colorado. Just give a sense of how big they are. 1,000 feet or so. I think we've got over 20 mountains, over 14,000 feet. So what ends up happening is that the cloud kind of goes over the top of us, and it doesn't rain very much here. We only get about 15, 16 inches of rain. We do have some lovely rivers, and it means that people like Coors and Budweiser, ignore whether you like their beer or not, they are highly successful breweries, and they have their HQs and
Yeah.
big facilities are local to us. So it's not a desert because we've got the rivers, but the rainfall is low and we get about 300 sunny days a year. In fact, fun fact for all your viewers, you could put it in the quiz, which you're probably not going to have as part of this. We actually get more sunny hours a year than Cairo does. And that's not Cairo, Texas, that's Cairo, Egypt.
Yeah.
So, cold winters, hot summers, very dry, very dry. Like I actually, in this, we talked earlier about humidity levels being like 50% or trying to keep them below 50% in Austin. I actually have a humidifier that's built into the HVAC system here, which adds humidity. And we normally get it no more than about 25% because otherwise it's working too hard. So uh, often humidity here is like 12%, which means you get dry skin and cracked lips, but it's lovely and crisp. And even when it's really hot, it doesn't feel that bad. And when it's really cold, it doesn't feel that bad.
Okay, so let's go back to the PV that was on the house that you bought, because moving into a house with an existing PV system, surely the job's all done. You don't have to do anything. It's all ready to go for you.
Yeah. So it had a PV system on it. I honestly think the PV system was actually a series of old Casio calculators, and they'd cut out the little PV panel and stuck it on the roof. It produced so little power, probably 6 to 8 modern panels worth of space on the roof, and produced, well, I never saw it produce more than 400 watts. And they were built into the tiles. So it was all a bit pathetic, really. It seems that the builders of this estate, I live on a housing estate, like not dissimilar actually, John, honestly, to yours. I mean, the houses are different shape and they're bigger and, all of that, but typical American houses.
Yeah.
This house is, now we've got the basement built out, we're at 6,200 square feet, which is kind of embarrassingly stupidly large, really. There's half the house that we
I,
don't really go in
I was
it.
going to say, do you need walkie-talkies so that you can find each other when you're wandering
Well, I
around the
do.
house?
We do actually have security cameras in most of the rooms because of my littles. My little kids are 4 and 6, and you don't want to wander around the house. You just look them up on the cameras, right? So it's not entirely dissimilar. Um, we have visitors, and we like to have long-term visitors. We've got a lot of family and friends that come and visit, so we like having a big house. Um, Again, it's not. It doesn't look like a mansion. It's pretty standard on my street. That's just the way it is. Land is a lot cheaper here than it is in the UK. So anyway, I had this PV system on it. It was absolutely pathetic. Our first year, our first summer, my electricity bill was $700 for the July or the August of that year. Now, Colorado, very different power system. One is part of the national grid, or the up to the Rockies grid. So we're all the way from New York or New England all the way over here, and that's 1,800 miles. We're all on the same network. So it gives you more fault tolerance, more sense that people actually know what they're doing, unlike the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, I'm paying 24 cents a kilowatt hour peak, and peak, depending on the time of year, is like early afternoon until early evening, or late afternoon until late evening. They have a summer and a winter thing, and then you have a when you're off peak, which is like 18 hours a day is our off peak. You're paying 8 cents a kilowatt hour, and because Colorado is a lot more comes to the use of PV, you actually get pretty much exactly the same numbers. They're like half a cent less if you send them back to the grid. So there's
Right.
quite a good advantage here of generating electricity and then selling it back to the grid during peak periods,
So you're
or
kind of
even
offsetting the not 100%, but you're mostly offsetting what you use. You just one for one credits for every kilowatt that you push back.
if you don't have children who leave all the doors open when they go into and out the garden, and when I say small children, I mean I'm talking about my 24-year-old does the same as well, as does his girlfriend and their dogs, and theoretically, yes, I could charge my batteries, and we'll talk about what I actually ended up getting in a second. But I could charge my batteries at 24 cents a kilowatt hour, or sorry, 8 cents a kilowatt hour, and sell it back to the grid at close to 24 if I so choose. Um, the reality is our electricity consumption and the amount of PV I put on the roof wasn't enough. So I'm wittering a bit here, but so we got this 400-watt super system. Realized that this is useless. I thought, well, I'll keep it, but then realized, no, I need the space on the roof for the new panels. Old roof ripped off and a new roof put on for that
So hang on,
section.
when you say roof ripped off, you actually had to replace the roof tiles and everything because this thing is embedded in the roof.
Yes, yeah, it was embedded in the tiles. That's why I think the Casio calculator thing came from. It was mainly all a tax dodge by the builders. I mean, they probably got got to do a bit of greenwashing and say, oh, the new eco thing of the future. Well, 400 watts on a 6,200 square foot house is not eco
Yeah,
anything.
they do it here with new builds. To get the planning through the local authorities. The local authority says you must put solar on the house, so they put the absolute bare minimum. So again, they'll take up 3/4 of the roof with 4 panels that are embedded in the roof because then they don't have to pay for the tiles that would go on the same area. And yeah, it ends up outputting 400 watts in a 4-bedroom house. So
Yeah.
it's
And in our street, all the houses but one that I'm aware of all, well, maybe a couple of houses, but almost everyone has replaced those solar shingles, they called them, with proper solar panels. Almost, I mean, almost. The guy over the road, friend of mine, Brian, he has both because the builders were so stupid when they put it in that they got the plan round the wrong way and put the tiled ones on the north side of his so it
so
produced
his
possibly even
400
less
watt
than
system.
mine.
His 400-watt system's now a 50-watt system. Then
Yeah, I mean, it was just all pathetic, right? So, so I ended up putting 10.5 kilowatts of PV on the roof. I decided to go with the Enphase system, and I put three 5 kilowatt, they're called the 5P batteries, in the basement of my
so
of my
let
house.
let's pause there for a minute because I'm interested in why you went Enphase. But Enphase is a different. The whole philosophy of Enphase is different from the SolarEdge because the SolarEdge is a string inverter with optimizers, and the Enphase is microinverters. So was that a conscious decision, or did you do what most people do and go, "I like the look of that one"? And
Well, I'm offended that you would imagine I would just make an emotional decision. Obviously, I pored over the spreadsheets and looked deeply into the technical side, and I quite like the look of the software that Enphase had, honestly.
so the
So
salesman came around and said, "Look at the
there,
pretty
there is,
picture on my phone."
I I object to that. I didn't say it was wrong. I just object. But there was a bit more science to it than that, perhaps. So as we discussed before, I had the SolarEdge system for Austin. I didn't like the software very much.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like having two inverters. That was patently a stupid idea. Microinverters seemed like a good idea at the time. So we put 10.5 kilowatts on. I put 15 kilowatts of battery in. Uh, First off, it was a good system I used a local supplier who came highly recommended, and they did a good job, right? It worked well. It
Hmm.
does work well. I prefer the software, frankly, to SolarEdge. I thought SolarEdge looked like my first website that they've
Yeah, to
built.
be honest, the SolarEdge, the people that design the SolarEdge app and the web interface and everything, all just need to be fired. And it feels so old and clunky, and it just doesn't have hardly any utility in it. If you want to look at it and see a number and see an arrow showing which way the power's going, it's good for that. Other than that, it's really not up to scratch. So yeah, I fully understand it. If it was up to me, I'd change mine in a heartbeat. But the chief financial officer won't even entertain that conversation right now.
So I think we agree on SolarEdge. Is Enphase wildly better? Not really. Um, I don't think it's actually probably any better. I mean, it looks a little nicer. It doesn't really give me any more better reporting. In fact, the ability to export it and then do something useful with the data seems to be even more limited than SolarEdge was. Um, I think in hindsight, I would do a few things. My electricity bill has dropped dramatically. I'm not having $700 summers anymore. 150 to $200 summers. So what would I change if I was to do it again? Well, if I was just to change, let's just the makeup of my existing solution, I probably would go for less battery for the same amount of money. I'd go for less battery. Those Enphase 5Ps are $7,000 once you've installed
Yeah,
them.
for a 5 kilowatt battery, that's at the
That's
premium end of the range.
it's very expensive, and adding more isn't any cheaper. I can't just like clip one in. We can talk about the mobile solutions, which I know you've got a million of. It's almost like it's an obsession. Uh,
It's
but
not an obsession. I can give it up at any time. I just choose
of
not
course you
to.
can. Of course you can. Yeah. Well, that's our session after this when I'm your analyst. Uh, but and I would have put more PV on the roof. Um, I would. That's something I would have changed. The I did ask recently, very recently, within the last month, what would happen if I put another 5 kilowatts on the roof, and they came back and said that's $16,000. And
Now
I was
that
like,
actually, but that brings up a question, because I remember we've had conversations about this in the past. Was in the UK, the there isn't this concept of permitting where you have to get the city to sign off on, installations and things to do with the power grid, and that seems to add an awful lot of cost to what should be a pretty basic solar install of get up on the roof, add 5 kilowatts of panels, and plug them into the existing system.
yeah, well, there's a couple of angles to consider. Firstly, in the US, and I believe this is, if it's federal, then it would be across every state. So I think I'm right in saying here that they can't stop you putting solar panels on your roof. Now you've got the HOA, the Homeowners Association, which is both and the bane of most people's lives, but also stops your neighbor starting up a car dealership or a gearbox changing business on his own driveway. So some
Stop
ways it's
storing a
good.
mattress and a Ford Cortina engine on his front lawn.
If you're not a scumbag like me, then it's great. But I know people who've been fined for leaving their garage door open. For example, some HOAs can get a bit extreme, but you can't stop you putting PV on your roof
Yeah.
because that's a federal thing. Even with Trump kid in charge, he hasn't got round to changing that. Uh, but the problem, there's a couple of problems. One, we don't have the cheap Chinese panels that you get in the UK. Um, and I think the installation cost is higher, and I think the cost of the panels is higher here. Um, and the cost of the PV, of the electricity you generate is lower. So actually, one could argue that I personally don't really understand why every single doesn't have a solar panel on it. It's not your weather's not as good for it, but the cost of your electricity is so much higher. You'd be
Yeah.
mad not to do it.
Yeah.
Um, so when I looked at that price, I went, how much for? I think it was 16,000 and something, all installed and rigged in and plumbed and. But $16,000 for 5 kilowatt hours more it seemed the ROI was going to be like 16 years or something. and I'm I'd probably be dead, but then, or would have moved, or sold the house, or all of the above,
Be on to your fourth solar system by that time, given the
possibly.
current rate of change.
I'm moving to Europa. The, the tidal systems there are way better. So anyway, long and short of it is, I don't think that makes any sense. And of course, the other reason it's so expensive is because I've had to go, or would have to go, for Enphase solar panels. I can't use normal ones because I've all got the microinverters in. So, which sort of brings us to, would I do this again? The answer is probably not. I think what I would do, before I actually say any more, I want to say I'm actually really quite pleased with the Enphase system. It's been faultless. It works really well. When we get wildfire alerts every so often, or storm alerts, and it will, back us up onto the power thing. We have lost power a couple of times, the area has, and we've been perfectly fine. So it's done everything I wanted it to. And at the time, it looked like a good idea. But now, batteries and PV panels are so incredibly inexpensive that the idea that I would be paying $7,000 for 5 kilowatt hours of Enphase battery is absurd. I mean, even if it's a well-known make, I can get it for a quarter that price. And
Yeah.
I saw the other day someone was selling a 32 kilowatt tower of power type thing on, I think it was Alibaba, but it was like $3,000 for 30 kilowatt
Yeah.
hours.
The cost of
I,
batteries is just falling through the floor, but Enphase have got you trapped in their nice little walled garden. Now, it's a lovely little garden, but you are trapped inside it.
and you can't
Can't really.
mix and match. That's the other problem. And I suspect this is true about all of these systems, that you really can't mix and match. And that's an issue for me. And because I'm Mr. Belt and Braces, I want the backup to the backup to the backup. To ask about my data backup, which is probably a whole nother
We're
call.
not going there. We do not have enough time to cover your
Yeah,
data backup
so
strategies.
you have your neuroses, and I have mine, and mine's mainly about data backup. The problem is, I would love to put a generator in as well, like a gas powered, a gasoline powered, a petrol powered a generator as a backup to the backup. Can't do that with Enphase. Um, I produced some videos about this last year or year before. The other way out on the battery side of things is to say, right, well, I'll run it through the electric car. We've got a Nissan Leaf, which is our little city car. Take the kids to school, drive around the city, maybe go to the airport. It's got a 60 kilowatt hour battery in it, and I rent it or lease this thing for $93 a month.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing. And I could, if I could use that bidirectionally, like Enphase promised me, and I have the video to prove it 2 years ago, then the cost of batteries becomes irrelevant because it's in the vehicle I'm using.
Well, maybe that's a
It
conversation for
turned out to
another
be a
day.
thing.
Because we can go into vehicle to grid because there's a whole load of certainly it's a topic I think we could spend a good hour on, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So I'm going to have to I'm
Sure.
going to bring this to the close with one final question. Was you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but you said if you were going to do it again, you weren't going to do it, but you didn't say what you would do. So would you go with another vendor, another PV system, or would you just say, hey, I'm going to do something completely different?
Now, I think what we'd probably do, it's a good question, right? And I don't know exactly all the options that are available now because, like you, I have a chief financial officer who said, no more, this is enough. So I can't rip this one out yet. And it wouldn't be economic to do it anyway. But if I was to start from scratch now, I would probably build something that was much more modular. I don't know who I would buy it from, but the ones where you can get like 12 or 20 kilowatt hours in stacks,
Yeah.
those look like a much better. I think Enphase actually may be one of the manufacturers of those, but there's Blue Yeti and a few other people make that sort of thing. I'd probably do that. I probably would not do microinverters, and I think I'd probably give up with the idea of having great software, because here's the dirty secret about good software. You and I, because we're nerds, we look at this software, and when I first had it, there was always a browser window open on the PC or my Mac, looking at where it was. Now I look at it once every 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
I'm nerdy, right? Your average person like the people who bought my Texas house, didn't look at it once in 2 years, and so what? It still produced very little, produced a very good power consumption for them. So I think what I would do is be more laissez-faire about the panels and the batteries and stuff, and I'd do a much more of a mix and match. It might not be quite as slick as the Enphase or even the SolarEdge would be, but it would probably be, if not an order of magnitude cheaper, at least half the price, and probably more like a quarter the price.
Yeah. So we're gonna have to wrap this up. So Simon, I really do appreciate you taking time out of what I know is quite a busy day for you, because although it's the end of the day here, it's your middle of your morning. So thank you for taking the time to at least come and talk to us. So if anyone wants to catch up with you online, I will obviously put your YouTube channel and everything in the description. But yeah, anything you want people to go take a look at. I know you've written a couple of books that certainly one of them that I'm credited in, so I'm going to push that one for you. But
Yeah,
what?
I've written a bunch of different books. Who Put That Idiot in Charge is my latest missive about how CEOs hijack companies. That's kind of comedy. The others are all a bit specialist. I suppose my best book would be The End of Certainty, which talks about technology change, and you are credited in that book. So yeah, go and find that. We'll put a link to it. I do have a YouTube channel, and I keep meaning to get more interested in it. I suppose what I'm most interested in is some feedback. If you want, and I know I don't sound it for professional reasons. Americans think you sound clever if you've got an English accent. It's not true, but they believe it anyway, so I keep it. Uh, I have a fair amount of experience on the American system now. If you want to know more about how the US works, particularly relative to the UK or other regions like Australia or other parts of Europe, I think it's kind of an interesting conversation. It's almost like the road not traveled. You can look at it and go, well, these are advantages of one system and these are advantages of another. So if your government, for example, decides to try and implement some ideas that have come out of another economy, well, if they've got some sort of US bent, I could give you an opinion on it at least.
Well,
Speed
so
through the other.
this is our first time we've ever done a two-person conversation type video. So I'd love to know what everyone thinks. Let us know in the comments below. If you want to hear more, you want to see more of Simon, then again, let us know. If you don't want to ever see Simon again, I'd love to know why, because I've been trying to get rid of him for the last 30 years and I still haven't figured out the way to do it. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you found this interesting. Simon is always an interesting character to talk to. Before you go, if you do find these videos interesting and you find the information on the channel useful, I'd love it if you'd click that like and subscribe button for me. And if you can, please do consider becoming a channel member. With that, I'm going to sign off, and if I'm lucky, I will see you back here real soon for another video. Take care. Bye-bye.